My name is Clara, I'm 38 years old, and on my birthday, my own father told me to sell my house to fund my sister's life and then kicked me out when I refused. Before I tell you about the folder I left on their kitchen table that made my mother scream and my father frantically call every lawyer in the state, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people who are supposed to love you most, then you'll understand what I did next. They thought they were cutting me off. They had no idea they had just severed their own lifeline. To understand what was in that folder, you have to understand the 5-year lie I had been living inside. You have to understand the house they thought was theirs. It all started 5 years ago. I had just made partner at my architecture firm, a huge promotion I had worked myself to the bone for. I'd just bought my first real property, not just an investment, but a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial I planned to make my home. A week after I closed, I got the call. It was my mother, Helen, sobbing hysterically. My father, Robert, had collapsed. A heart condition, she'd cried, brought on by stress. His business, the one he'd poured his life into, was failing. They were going to lose everything, including the family home. The doctor, a friend of my father's, had said the only thing that could save him was to eliminate all sources of stress. My blood ran cold. I rushed to their side. My father was pale, clutching his chest, talking about foreclosure and being thrown out onto the street. My younger sister, Chloe, was there, dabbing at her dry eyes, talking about how she couldn't possibly handle this kind of pressure. It was a perfectly staged performance, and I, the ever-reliable daughter, fell for it hook, line, and sinker. To save them from foreclosure, to save my father's life, I made a decision. I sold the colonial I had just bought and used my entire life savings to buy their house from the bank, taking over the massive mortgage myself. The deed was transferred to my name. It's just a temporary formality, honey, my mother had cooed, squeezing my hand. Just until your father is back on his feet. I moved back in, telling myself it was to help them manage things, to make sure my dad didn't have any more episodes. And from the very beginning, I made one smart move, a decision born from a tiny, nagging voice of self-preservation I should have listened to more. I insisted that all mail related to the property, the deed, the tax bills, the mortgage statements, be sent to a private P.O. box I opened. I don't want Dad seeing these bills and getting stressed again, I explained. They readily agreed, relieved to have the burden lifted. The years that followed were a slow, methodical bleed. Temporary became permanent. My father never seemed to get back on his feet, yet he managed to buy a new set of golf clubs. My mother's wardrobe was mysteriously updated every season. And Chloe treated my salary as her personal allowance. There was the emergency $500 dress for a friend's wedding, the $2,000 weekend trip to Miami because she was creatively blocked, the constant "can you spot me for this?" that was never, ever paid back. I was the family engine, running silently in the background, paying for everything from the groceries to the Wi-Fi to the property taxes my father conveniently forgot about every year. I would watch him stand on the front lawn, telling our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, just had the roof redone. A man's gotta take care of his castle. I was the one who had paid the $10,000 invoice for that roof. I just smiled weakly from the window, feeling like a ghost in my own life. My friend Ben, a fellow architect, tried to warn me. We'd meet for coffee, and he'd look at me with such pity in his eyes. He once saw a credit card statement I'd accidentally left on the table. "Clara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't helping. This is enabling. They're living in a fantasy funded by your hard work. You're not a daughter to them, you're a utility." I knew he was right, but the guilt was a prison. Every time I thought of setting a boundary, the image of my father clutching his chest would flash in my mind. But a machine can only run for so long without maintenance. And on my 38th birthday, the engine finally seized. There was no party. No cake. Not even a card left on the kitchen counter. It was just another Tuesday. I woke up, went to work, and came home. The silence in the house was heavy, indifferent. I was sitting in my room, trying to muster the energy to face them, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. My heart didn't even leap with hope that it was a belated birthday wish. I knew better. I opened it. Sell your investment property. Chloe needs a down payment for an apartment. She can't be expected to live here forever. I stared at the words, my vision blurring. My investment property was a small condo I'd managed to buy a few years into my sacrifice, a tiny lifeline to a future where I wasn't funding 3 other adults. It was the only thing that was truly mine. I typed back a single word, no. The reply was instantaneous. Don't be selfish. She's your sister. Before I could even process that, another text came through. And she needs the $10,000 car loan paid off by Friday. Take care of it. That was it. Something inside me didn't just break, it shattered into ice. The fear, the guilt, the obligation, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't about need. This was about entitlement. This wasn't a request. It was a demand. I went downstairs. They were all in the living room, watching TV, as if nothing had happened. My father didn't even look up from his show. Did you handle that thing for your sister? No, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I'm not selling my condo. And I'm not paying her car loan. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes were cold. Excuse me? You heard me. My mother jumped in, her voice taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone. Clara, don't be difficult. Think of your sister. She's always needed a little more help. You're the strong one. Chloe, from her throne on the sofa, let out an exaggerated sigh. I just don't see what the big deal is. You have the money. The big deal, I said, looking directly at her, is that it's my money. I earned it. My father stood up then, his face flushing with anger. He puffed out his chest, the king in his castle. Listen to me. As long as you live under my roof, you will contribute to this family as I see fit. You will do as you're told. That line. Under my roof. It was the spark that lit the fuse. I almost laughed. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. No, I said again, the word tasting like freedom. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. Then get out. You're cut off. We're done with you. I looked at my mother, her face a mask of disappointment, not in him, but in me. I looked at my sister, who was watching with a smug, triumphant smirk, already spending the money in her head. And I knew. I was utterly alone. And for the first time in 5 years, that felt like a relief. Okay, I said. I turned without another word, walked upstairs to my room, and packed a single overnight bag. I didn't take the photos off the wall. I didn't take the books I loved. I just took my laptop, my wallet, and my keys. As I walked past the living room and toward the front door, my father called out one last time, and don't expect to come crawling back. I didn't even turn around. I just pulled the doors shut behind me, the quiet click echoing the end of my life as I knew it. The silence I left behind was more powerful than any shouting match could ever be. I didn't go to Ben's house. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone ever again. I drove to the nicest hotel in the city, the kind Chloe would have loved, and I checked into a suite. It was the first selfish thing I had done in 5 years, and it felt like breathing after being held underwater. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. I sat on the plush king-sized bed, the city lights twinkling below, and I let the cold fury wash over me. For a moment, I felt overwhelmed, the sheer injustice of it all threatening to swallow me whole. Then, my eyes landed on my purse, and I remembered a small, framed photo I kept in it. It was of my grandmother, the one who had believed in me, the one who had paid for my first drafting set. Before she passed away, right after my promotion, she had told me, "Clara, your heart is kind, but your spine is steel. Don't ever let anyone mistake one for the other." Her words, a memory from before the great lie began, became my anchor. My spine was steel. It was time to prove it. I opened my laptop. My hands were steady. The years of being the family's silent, efficient manager had prepared me for this moment. I wasn't just an architect, I was a meticulous planner. And I was about to design my own liberation. First, I logged into my secure cloud storage. I downloaded the files I had so diligently organized over the years, my own private insurance policy. 1. The official, notarized deed to the house at 125 Elm Street, with my name, Clara Peterson, listed as the sole owner. The heavy paper and official seal seemed to glow on the screen. 2. 5 years of mortgage statements, totaling over $200,000, every single payment automatically drafted from my personal bank account. I used a program to highlight my name on every single one. 3. The masterpiece. A detailed, multi-tabbed spreadsheet. I had tracked every penny. Property taxes, $42,500. Utilities, $28,800. Groceries, an estimated $60,000. And a special tab labeled Chloe's expenses, which totaled a nauseating $47,219.54. The grand total at the bottom of the page was well over $350,000. Next, I made a call. Not to Ben. To Mr. Davies, my personal attorney. The sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had handled the purchase of the house for me 5 years ago. My family thought of him as the family lawyer because he'd once drafted a will for my grandmother, but he worked for me. His loyalty was to his client. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice clear and even. "I need 2 things. First, I need you to draw up a formal eviction notice for Robert, Helen, and Chloe Peterson. 30 days. There was a pause on the other end. "Clara? Is everything all right?" "Everything is finally going to be," I replied. "Second, I need you to schedule a meeting in your office for tomorrow afternoon. For them. I'll be there." "Consider it done," he said, the professional in him recognizing the steel in my tone. My final act that night was the most important. I wasn't going to sneak back to the house myself. That was the old, apologetic Clara. The new Clara was a professional. I found the website for a 24-hour legal courier service. I uploaded the documents, the deed, the mortgage statements, the spreadsheet, into a single PDF file with a cover letter I wrote myself. The letter was simple. To Robert, Helen, and Chloe Peterson. Per our conversation on October 12th, I have vacated the property. Enclosed are documents for your review. Please be prepared for our meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the offices of Davies and Associates. Sincerely, Clara Peterson. I paid the rush fee. A uniformed courier would deliver it to their front door at precisely 8 a.m. It would be cold, official, and utterly terrifying. I hit confirm, leaned back against the headboard, and for the first time in a long, long time, I slept soundly. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the hotel window. I ordered room service, another small act of rebellion. As I was sipping my coffee, my phone, which I had put on silent, began to vibrate violently on the nightstand. It lit up with my father's name. I watched it buzz, a frantic, angry insect, and I smiled. The courier had arrived. The scene, as it was later described to me by a mortified Mr. Davies, was pure chaos. The courier, a young man just doing his job, handed the crisp, legally sealed envelope to my father, who snatched it with a dismissive grunt, assuming it was from me, begging to be let back in. He tore it open at the kitchen table. He read the cover letter first, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then he saw the deed. He stared at my name, printed in bold, undeniable black ink under the heading Property Owner. His face, my mother said, went from ruddy to a pasty, sickly white. He started shuffling through the pages, his hands trembling. He saw the mortgage statements, page after page, all paid by me. Then he got to the spreadsheet. The neatly organized columns of numbers, the six-figure total at the bottom. My mother, wondering what was wrong, took the papers from his shaking hands. She let out a small, strangled shriek. Chloe, drawn by the sound, sauntered into the kitchen. She peered over my mother's shoulder, and her usual smirk dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. That's when the calls started. My father, sputtering, called me first. I ignored it. He called again. Ignored. Then my mother, her text a series of frantic, pleading question marks. Ignored. Then Chloe, a string of angry, misspelled accusations. Ignored. Their final, desperate call was to Mr. Davies, the man they thought was their ally. What is this? My father had roared into the phone. This is some kind of mistake. It's my house. And Mr. Davies, in his calm, professional voice, delivered the devastating blow. I'm afraid there's no mistake, Robert. I'm looking at the file right now. I represent Ms. Clara Peterson, the sole and legal owner of the property you currently reside in. I suggest you attend the meeting this afternoon. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock. I arrived at 1:55, dressed in my sharpest black suit, the kind I wore for major client presentations. I felt like a warrior in armor. I sat with Mr. Davies in his office, a calm, quiet space with shelves of leather-bound books. We were a united front. They burst in at 2:10, a whirlwind of disheveled fury and panic. My father's face was blotchy and red. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. Chloe looked like a cornered animal. They sat opposite us, a tableau of shattered entitlement. My father slammed his hand on the polished mahogany table. What is the meaning of this, Clara? He bellowed, his voice cracking. A childish prank? You think you can forge some documents and scare us? I didn't flinch. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I spoke, my voice as cool and level as a pane of glass. There are no forgeries, Dad. Those are public records. I looked him straight in the eye. Last night, you told me to get out of your house. I did. The problem is, you were standing in my house when you said it. My mother gasped, a hand flying to her throat. But it was just a formality. We're family. Family doesn't treat one another like a living bank account, I said, turning my gaze to her. For 5 years, I have paid for every bill, every meal, every vacation, all while you let me believe I was saving my father's life. Chloe finally found her voice, shrill and piercing. You owed us. You had all the success, the big salary. You had a promotion. You could afford it. We needed it. I needed it. No, Chloe, I corrected her. You didn't need it. You wanted it. You felt entitled to it. You felt entitled to my labor, my money, and my future. I leaned forward slightly. You felt entitled to my inheritance, the one Grandma left me that I used to save this family. You spent it all. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, bringing a halt to their rising hysteria. He opened a folder in front of him. The legal situation is unambiguous, he stated, his voice cutting through the drama. The title to the property is solely in Ms. Peterson's name. The mortgage has been paid exclusively by Ms. Peterson for 60 consecutive months. Legally, he looked at my parents, you are tenants. And your tenancy is now being terminated. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. My father, the big, blustering patriarch, seemed to shrink in his chair, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. My mother's pleading tears turned into the silent, terrified tears of someone who has just realized they are truly homeless. And then, I performed my final act. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a single, crisp document, and slid it across the table. It was the formal eviction notice. "You have 30 days," I said. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. As my family stumbled out of the lawyer's office, broken and defeated, Chloe, in a last-ditch effort, pulled out her phone. I saw her frantically text her fiancé, Leo. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. She was about to drag him into this mess. But I had underestimated the ripple effect of the truth. 20 minutes later, as I was sitting in my car, my own phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Is this Clara?" a man's voice asked. It was Leo. "Yes," I said. I was just at your parents' new rental," he said, his voice strained. "Chloe called me, hysterical. She told me everything. How you kicked them out of their house." He paused. "Then she demanded I give her money to hire a lawyer to sue you. When I told her my own finances were tight, she had a meltdown. She told me I was useless if I didn't have money." He let out a bitter laugh. "They told me your family owned 3 properties. They told me you were the difficult one. It was all a lie. I'm sorry you had to deal with this. I just wanted you to know. I'm done. We're done." He hung up. It wasn't a divorce in the legal sense, but it was the divorce of a man from a family built on deception. My own family didn't wait long. That evening, my mother called. The rage was gone, replaced by the weapon she wielded best, manipulative, tearful pleading. "Clara, baby, how can you do this to us? To your mother? After all I've done for you. Where will we go? Your father's heart can't take this." The old Clara would have buckled. The old Clara would have felt the crushing weight of guilt. But the new Clara heard the words for what they were, not a plea for help, but another demand for sacrifice. An attempt to lock the cage door she had just broken open. I let her finish. And when she was done, her sobs echoing down the line, I took a deep breath and set my first, and final, boundary. "I am not going to discuss this with you anymore, Mom," I said, my voice gentle but unbreakable. "All future communication will go through Mr. Davies." And before she could reply, I ended the call. I blocked her number. I blocked my father's. I blocked Chloe's. For the first time in my adult life, the line was silent. And the silence was peace. The next 6 months were a renaissance. I moved back into my house, and the first thing I did was hire a crew to repaint every single room, erasing the heavy, dark colors my mother loved and replacing them with shades of white, light gray, and sunlit yellow. I got rid of the bulky, ornate furniture my parents had insisted on, furniture that had always felt like it was crowding me out of my own space. I sold it and used the money to buy clean, modern pieces that I loved. The house could finally breathe. And so could I. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, came over one afternoon with a freshly baked apple pie. She stood in my new, airy living room and looked around with tears in her eyes. "Oh, honey," she said, patting my arm. "It's so lovely to see this house finally happy again. To see you happy." She had seen it all, the silent sacrifices, the years I had spent dimming my own light to keep theirs burning. Her simple validation meant more to me than 1,000 apologies from my family ever could. Freed from the constant financial and emotional drain, my work flourished. I spearheaded a new project at my firm, a sustainable community center, and won a major architectural award for the design. At the awards ceremony, during my acceptance speech, I announced the formation of a new grant, the Eleanor Peterson Legacy Fund, named after my grandmother. It would be a small college fund, designed to provide a scholarship each year to a promising young woman entering the field of architecture. It was a way to turn the money my family had tried to steal into a force for good, to build something new from the wreckage of the old. I didn't hear from my family directly, but news travels. Through Ben, who had heard it from a distant cousin, I got the update. They were renting a cramped, two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the other side of town. My father had been forced to take a job as a greeter at a big-box store, his pride shattered. And Chloe, I saw for myself. About 5 months after the meeting, I was grabbing a quick lunch at a cheap diner near a construction site. And there she was. My little sister, the golden child who had always been too good for manual labor, was a waitress. She wore a cheap, faded blue uniform that didn't fit right. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her nails, once perfectly manicured, were chipped. She was refilling a salt shaker, her expression sullen. Our eyes met across the crowded room. In that one fleeting moment, a universe of things passed between us. I saw shock in her eyes, then shame, then a flash of the old, familiar resentment. She saw me, in my tailored suit, confident and calm. She saw everything she had lost, everything she had thrown away because she believed she was entitled to what was mine. She broke eye contact first, turning abruptly and disappearing into the kitchen. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I didn't feel hatred. I felt a profound, quiet sadness for the sister I never really had. I paid my bill, left a generous tip, and walked out without looking back. That was closure enough. It's been a year now. I'm standing on the back porch of my house, watching the sun set. The garden, which had been neglected for years, is now thriving. I've planted tomatoes, lavender, and a small rose bush, just like my grandmother used to have. The air smells sweet. I don't hate my family. I don't think about them much at all, to be honest. I've come to understand that they are prisoners of their own making, trapped in a cycle of entitlement and resentment. Forgiving them isn't my job. My job was to save myself. For years, I thought my value was measured by how much I could give them, how much of myself I could sacrifice on the altar of family. I thought their love was conditional on my compliance. The day they kicked me out was the day they handed me the key to my own cage. They didn't just lose a house, they lost a daughter who would have done anything for them, had they only shown an ounce of respect. And I didn't just gain a house. I gained myself. My peace, my future, my self-respect. And that is an inheritance no one can ever take from me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I feel it's important. I have to ask, have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your own well-being and the unreasonable demands of your family? What did you do? I would love to read about your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need to hear that it's okay to put yourself first.